Joey, Patrick, Jared. Appreciate y'all joining. If you guys just want to go and give some quick intros real quick before we get started. Joey, I'll kick it off with you.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm Joey. I lead product at ResearchGate, which is kind of like the biggest platform for scientists in the world. It's like a LinkedIn for science, basically. And I've been, kind of investigating Web3 for the past year or two, specifically actually thinking about a lot of these topics around interoperability, because I think they really apply to science. And through it, I've just kind of gotten involved in some of these communities, and I've been working with Forefront and these guys for a while. So I've been writing as I find things along the way, and that's how we're here.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Joey. Patrick?
Hey everyone, I'm Patrick. I'm currently a software engineer at Mirror, and we're building tools to help creators and communities to raise money and to earn revenue through NFTs. And before that, I was at a DeFi startup called Dharma and also at Instacart. And I've been in crypto for probably the last year and a half, and started off more on the DeFi side, but became more interested in creators because I just saw with myself, I wasn't spending time watching Fox News or CNN. I was on Twitter, I was listening to podcasts, I was on YouTube, etc. And so I just felt like, that was definitely the future, and wanted to build tools for the people that were trying to earn a living and sharing content that was educational or informative or entertaining. And that's kind of what we're trying to do now at Mirror in a very crypto native way.
Doing an amazing job at it too. So big props to you and the team at Mirror.
Thanks,
Jared?
Thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Jared Dicker. I'm a partner at the Churning Group, which is an investment firm focused on consumer across content, commerce, community. My area of focus is around Web3 and crypto. So investing both early stage as well as later stage, that really kind of hits on that criteria of the opportunities that'll really start to welcome people outside of crypto into it. It's something I've just been calling consumer on-ramps. Prior, I've been in media for about a decade. I was early at the Huffington Post and at a company, Rebel Mouse, and ran R&D and was the commercial chief at the Washington Post over the past few years. Was the founding CEO of a protocol called Poet for people who remember the ICO days back in 2017, 18-ish. And just love this space. Spend a lot of time writing on a blog called Dark Star on Mirror. Obsessed with the Mirror crew, big fan of them. And just really excited to be here and jam with you all.
Awesome. Super excited. Thank you all for the intros. I think the best way to start this conversation is, Joey, you wrote the awesome piece that was published on the Forefront Mirror. I believe Carlos just linked it in the voice text. If people want to go check it out, if they haven't already. So if you could just give a quick summary of A, what the piece is about, and then B, just your inspiration behind the piece. And I think that would be a really great segue into opening up this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you the real inspiration with I can maybe only share via Discord, but I've been working on Web2 social networks for a while now. As I mentioned, ResearchGate is like the biggest social network for scientists in the world. We've built this massive graph of content. So, which scientists are connected to which publications are connected to which institutions. And it's basically the biggest knowledge graph in the world if you think of knowledge as the output of science. And something that always kind of really frustrated, it still does frustrate me, is that, every time that someone wants to build a new product in science, that they basically have to try to build this knowledge graph from scratch, which is kind of the reason that we, can build a big business. So that was actually what, drew me back to crypto, over a year ago now, was kind of that frustration and seeing this new system being kind of developed in Web3, where that's not the moat that people build. And they build, other moats where you can, build data and information that is shared seamlessly through products. So that was kind of the original inspiration for me, not only to write this piece, but for this whole kind of journey. And in the piece itself, I kind of wanted just to lay out, what does interoperability actually mean? So that when you have multiple services that are kind of using the same information, so what does that actually really mean? How, what are the components of it that you would need to have in order to really build this at scale? And then I also just wanted to kind of really unpack Mirror, because I think Mirror is this really interesting example where the pieces are totally interoperable. It is a content platform kind of at first glance, but when you really think about what makes them a durable business for the long term, it's totally not content. It is all these, mechanisms and tools that they build for creators to build their business. And I just think it's worth unpacking, because you can kind of get tricked into thinking that this is, one thing when it's actually something different and actually even bigger. So that was kind of what I wanted to lay out, in the piece. And really the last thing is making an argument that there is a tipping point where, we can really see the dominoes start to fall, and interoperability becomes just a kind of key component of a lot of the products that we use. So, and there's some interesting examples of that. Even the big, social platforms are really pursuing this somewhat under the radar, but in some ways not under the radar. So I just kind of wanted to lay that out for people and hopefully open up a conversation about, how does this happen? When does this happen? And, who gets there first? And, maybe it's Mirror.
Yeah, super interesting. And I definitely think Mirror is on the forefront of this particular narrative. So, Patrick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on just the interoperability narrative more generally. And also how you feel, and Jared would love your thoughts as well, how you guys feel that this future plays out in both the short and long term.
Yeah, I think the interoperability thing is really interesting, where it's I think the idealist point of view is okay, you have 8 tools, you have Discord, Snapshot, you have, what else? You use Mirror for crowdfunding, use another tool for OpenSea for secondary sales, and you have Gnosis for multi-sig, and interoperability means, okay, all these different tools, you can use any of them and you're not locked in, etc. But that at Mirror, we're realizing that just being consumers of all these different products, being involved in DAOs, that's not necessarily the best experience. And that's not really just because something is a smart contract deployed on Ethereum. In theory, it's interoperable, but in practice, it's very hard, for people to use these things, to get the most out of them. Like Jared mentioned earlier around consumer on-ramps, if we're going to get the next 100 million people into crypto, it's probably not this form of interoperability. And so at least at Mirror, when we think about it, first, kind of the first phase of Mirror is going to be around integrating a lot of these tools into the Mirror protocol on the back end, on the smart contract side, and then also have a UI that makes it easy to use all these different tools across the DAO stack or the community stack. So there's things like crowdfunding, things like monetization, governance, treasury management, communications, secondary sales. And so having an integrated way of just doing all these things and have a home for your community is kind of phase 1. But then phase 2 after that is kind of another form of interoperability, where it's okay, now I think that interoperability is probably going to happen more on the back end side, like we see in DeFi, where in DeFi, when you're using the best DeFi products, they kind of abstract away the interoperability. And so in the background, if you use an aggregator like 1inch, and so for those that don't know, if you go to Uniswap, you're only using exchange, but if you use an aggregator called 1inch, it'll basically find the best price or most efficient price for the pair that you're trying to trade across multiple decentralized exchanges. And so that's interoperability, extreme interoperability. What happens in the background, and it doesn't compromise the user experience. And so kind of the next phase where eventually we want to get at Mirror is that all of our contracts are open source interoperable, and there's a Mirror for X, where it's similar tools, similar contracts, if not the same contracts, but targeted to a specific use case, or the front end client has a specific vibe, or it caters to a specific type of creator, et cetera, or just forks the tools in a certain way or builds on top of them in a certain way. And so I think that that's kind of one distinguishing point around where should interoperability happen? Does it happen on the user layer, or does it happen more in the background? And that's kind of what we're thinking about. And we view it in 2 phases, where first phase is you don't want to share that complexity to the user, to the customer. And the second phase is that we want to architect the system in a way that anyone can plug into our backend and create their own backend that composes with many different protocols.
Is it better now?
There we go.
Oh, sweet. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was like going on a whole rant. I was like, okay, yeah, I'd say like a very like more, I guess, macro trend as it relates to interoperability, which is exciting, is that, this notion of open networks really starts to move where we attribute value. And, you look at a lot of the creator and consumer platforms in Web2 were very highly contained, right? From like how you registered as a user within those spaces to how and what you could consume to where you engage. It was just very much limited within those walls because the business model and the incentives were really structured around that. And what's become obvious, I'd say, over the past like few years is there's a way deeper desire, right, for individuals to be able to take those things and move elsewhere. And I feel like we saw a couple early instances of this with the emergence of Substack and a lot of kind of Web2 platforms that were still trying to attribute value on individual and individual agency. But, there's still this risk of getting stuck, right, when the model exists there. So what I think is most fascinating about interoperability at this time, especially as it relates to both creators and consumers, is that the notion is really kind of around what consumers have always wanted, which is, I want to be able to subscribe to the things that I'm most interested in. I want to be able to, invest or engage with communities, right, across a variety of platforms, not on a single platform. I want to be able to build, a business that may be fundraised or may be able to drive advertising revenue or may be able to drive subscription or token revenue. And that's where I think a majority of the focus needs to be here. Like it needs to really look at individuals as assets, really having platforms deeply understand and see the value of one, being comfortable, letting users go in and out, but two, knowing that that's really how they start to build trust. Like even though, Twitter isn't, fully decentralized and doing a ton of interesting things yet as it relates to, crypto components, Twitter's POV has always really been you should spend time on Twitter. There's a lot of value here, but if you go elsewhere, cool. You want to create a Substack and then leverage Twitter to drive traffic there. That's great, right? You want to be on Twitch or YouTube. That's great. They've really kind of brokered themselves as the bridges and tunnels of Web2. And I think when we think about interoperability in Web3, to Patrick's point, it really is about that. It's how do you seamlessly allow people to move across platforms while being able to build a business model on your individual platform that, not only drives value financially for you and helps continue that platform and keep going, but also, gives comfort in knowing that that's what these individuals want.
Yeah, super interesting perspective. And I actually think so. Joey mentioned this idea in the piece of Web 2.5. And Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you've tweeted about this a bit, talked about this a bit as well. And Patrick, you and I's first conversation ever was about your bearishness on this idea of Web 2.5. So I'd like to open up the conversation first, Joey, about how you think this transition from where we're currently at, both on the Web 2 side of things, but also where the world currently lives in Web 3, to the future that we're imagining. What does that transition look like? And how does this idea of Web 2.5 sort of fit in the picture?
Yeah. For me, the shifting, ties to Web 2 also just come with a much more creator-centric approach. And that's kind of what Substacks and Patreons kind of learned, is that creators are able to build such big businesses now, just directly kind of monetizing their audience, that they need to build platforms that cater to creators a bit more directly. And part of that is, owning your audience, was this kind of a buzzword that I think Substack used to get pretty big, or one of them, which is the idea that you build your newsletter list there. If someday Substack was hey, you got to pay to send an email, then you could just be all right, see you later. Let me take my email list and move it on to another platform. So that's just kind of a tipping point. But one thing that in terms of how do we get all the way to Web3, and something that Pat and Jared both kind of mentioned that just can't be overstated. It's just the user experience. When does it get to be a dramatically better user experience to actually work with interoperable platforms than these kind of centralized platforms. That's like the hard part. I mean, these existing Web2 platforms are really easy to use because they basically own the entire experience, and so they can make it really good. And I think you're already seeing like just so many different ingredients to that. So just the fact that Mirror uses your ETH address, your wallet, to actually publish means that when you go out and use another platform, you essentially already have your user ID that you can use, and maybe you're able to kind of store something from multiple platforms in the same wallet. Or if people start collecting NFTs from all over the place, and they want obviously those things to be reflected in any wallet that they use, platform that they use. So I think it's these kind of ingredients, as people are kind of scattering, like Jared said, they're kind of scattering their contribution to their accumulations of value in more places. Then the user experience at some point will just be dramatically better for to use a platform that is much more interoperable. And I think that's the point at which this becomes the 100, 200 million person tipping point. So I think that's the maybe multiple steps to get there, but that's what I think about.
If you think about the Web 2.5 Onramp, which is effectively like an augmented way of showcasing like the current internet experiences with what could be unlocked in the next one. I think like one important thing to recognize too is that, especially when you think of consumers, like outside of creators, like people who are actually going to come in and use these products, in the end, right, they are not thinking about what the technology and infrastructure is built on, right? There is this relationship of, consumer platform and technology opportunity when new infrastructure emerges, and that's what we're seeing right now. But in the end, right, like people aren't going to be using a platform and be thinking about, the architectural compounds of what's built it. Like, when you use Spotify or Netflix or any of these things, you're not really thinking about how it's hosted. You just want it to work. And that's where I think Web 2.5 needs to really shine most, is understanding how to build applications or platforms or protocols that work in a way that is desirable to existing users, or kind of in the flow of their existing user experience, but really starts to kind of showcase and unlock value for them, right? That's where, again, like full disclosure, I was an investor in Mirror, and I'm very big fan of that crew. But what was kind of like one of the most obvious opportunities with them personally was that, they were building an environment that was very comfortable for creators. Like you have like a WYSIWYG editor, you could create content, you could publish it on the web, but now all of a sudden you're able to crowdfund, or, you're able to split payments between multiple people, or you're able to like drive donations to, certain protocols that you're looking to contribute to. And like, that is where I think this Web 2.5 really starts to grow. So whether it's like interoperability, or, the ability to leverage wallets, or how we think about identity, or how we think about splitting revenue, really being able to really understand that consumers just want things to work and they want to be comfortable in an environment. But the opportunity to really showcase and shepherd new people in is really to show them all of the things that Web3 unlocks will kind of be this massive inflection point where more and more users will just totally get it and start to move in.
Yeah. Patrick, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would say, I think that Web 2.5 is like necessary in the short term. And the way that I would define it is like, it's basically you're doing things like, maybe it's like sign in with email, and then you have a wallet that this company that they custody it, and at the end of the day they can authorize or not authorize transactions and stuff like that. But to Jared's point, I think it being practical, like we're seeing tons of products that, like for example, like Top Shot or other types of products like that, where they make certain compromises on like the purely technical Web3 idealistic solution, and make compromises that make it easier for people to get on board. And I think that in the short term, 100%, that in many cases that makes sense. But I think that in the long term, you get to this vision of you have, like, ideally there are these decentralized networks. They're governed by a token. All the revenue is going to a treasury, which is a smart contract on chain. It's not going to a bank account. There's not like there's not like a we want to see necessarily. And will probably change exactly how these DAOs are structured. But yeah, I think that to get to that place where also third-party teams can integrate with the data, like the source of truth should be whatever blockchain you're building on. So then if somebody wants to go and build their own product or is upset with the rules of the underlying protocol, they can go and import their data elsewhere. And so for me, that's Web3. And I think in the near term, we get to make some compromises where certain things will be stored in a database, or there's a company might take custody of your keys. But yeah, I think practically there's definitely trade-offs. And I think that's not what I'm most excited about in the long term, but at least in the short term, that's definitely needed to solve a lot of these problems and to kind of get to where we want to be in the long term.
Really related to Joey's article is I don't think all of the pressure needs to be on the technology and platform to really convey the ultimate value. Like, I think that needs to be something that we think of as product builders, as to more deeply understand how to invite more users in. But what I love most about the crypto space is that so much effort is put in, like, writing and education and explaining, whether it's through technology that could do that, like what Brian does with Rabbit Hole, or, you know, actually just writing like we all do here on Mirror about ways that we could really see opportunities being unlocked in all of these different sectors. Like the main purpose of kind of Darkstar early on was like, how can we write to a very crypto native community and kind of talk about how crypto could help fix things outside of their current ecosystem, like really start to like shine a light on like what's happening outside of crypto and where we see crypto really being able to fit in there. But at the same time, in like a very schizophrenic way, like being able to talk to people outside of crypto in a way that makes sense to them, so that, you know, it's not a turnoff, but in fact, it's educating for them to be like, oh, wow, like, you know, I may work at a media company, or I may be in retail, or, you know, I may be in this other sector, and this sort of stuff speaks to me, and I could totally see now, right, how this is applicable to my industry. And like, I think that that's a big power play too, as it relates to everything we're talking about, is, you know, the content creation is just massive in this space. And I think probably everyone listening on this call spends a lot of time reading other people that they know to like better understand and think about how, you know, they can make these things applicable.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's something that I always kind of like am pestering Patrick about, because especially in kind of like the current world where, you know, some of the, like Mirror, I think, is being built, you know, 3 or maybe 10 years ahead of its kind of future vision, which, I mean, it's like being future proof. So like Patrick said, like a lot of the things are being built interoperable and, you know, open standards, but it's almost like maybe the adoption of those things isn't super high yet, just because the ecosystem around it needs to evolve, like the other products that need to be built into it needs to evolve. So I think what's really valuable about, you know, writing is that some of these, you just kind of have to understand the pieces that are available already to kind of build into. And that's, I mean, I think for other product builders, like that's often the missing piece. So I mean, you know, I guess Patrick, like I'm curious, like what are the projects that maybe, you know, people could already be building into Mirror that you want to kind of exist, that maybe people haven't been thinking about. I'm only asking that because I know that you have an answer to that question.
Yeah, I do that. Definitely tons of stuff. We're still a pretty small team, and most of the time we're and deprioritizing things. But one that I think is super interesting is going to be crypto native forms of discovery and curation. And so an early example of this is the Right Race, which is how we onboard new members onto Mirror. And so the idea is that anybody can join, connect your Twitter account to an Ethereum address, and then existing Mirror members have 100x the voting power as non-members. And then there's a 2-hour voting period each week. And then people get to stake some of their votes on any number of candidates. And so there's definitely issues with that, such as it can turn into a popularity contest, and we need more clever ways of connecting identity and ways of showing reputation from other areas, and not just, okay, who can get the most reach through Twitter, who has the best network. And so, but I think that like future iterations of that, like specifically for, say, like Mirror content, is that, in the past, a lot of the way that we're served content on social media is through these algorithmic feeds. And so basically ingest a bunch of data, and then the company, some product manager within the company decides, okay, what is the metric we want to optimize for? And this week it might be, okay, we want to drive traffic to our like business accounts, or this week we want to drive traffic to pages, or this week we want to drive traffic to creators. And so, but it's, of course, it's a centralized process, opaque. Nobody knows when the rules are going to change or how exactly they change. And so I think a crypto native form of this could be, you have these different DAOs. And so it could be as small as just like 5 to 10 people. And you say, hey, we're going to focus on curation on Mirror. We're going to spin up different teams. And this team is going to curate the best DeFi content. This team is going to curate the best creator economy content. This team is going to curate the best NFT content. This team is going to curate the best newsletter. And they all have like their own token for the specific vertical of content. And then token holders get to vote on, similar to Right Race, on which content should be included in the registry this week or in this leaderboard for the week. And then also, because it's just tokens that live on Ethereum, you can also attach value to them. You can create a liquidity pool on Uniswap, or you can do things like make the tokens redeemable for a prize. And so you can share, A, it's more transparent. People can see just through the Discord or whatever mechanism is used to curate these different lists. B, you're able to reward the writers, the curators, the people within the network. And I think and C, I also think it's just a more fun, like social experience. And it's like social apps, it's not just about sharing content, likes, followers, subscribers. It's also about collective decision making. I think that's like the next era of social. It's we're going to be making decisions together, and we're going to be increasing the value of our assets together. And I think that'll be just a really fun experience. And ideally, at some point, someone can build that into Mirror.
Can we have that like tomorrow?
Yeah, right.
No, that sounds sick. And I think, well, actually, before I say this, we want to open up the stage sometime soon to audience questions. So either drop your questions in the voice text chat, please, or just raise your hand and you can come to stage and ask the question. But yeah, I think that's like a particularly interesting vision. I appreciate you, Patrick, for sharing that. And B, leaning back to this idea of like user experience and what the design of the product looks like versus like the education that's happening around product. I think given examples that Patrick is describing, it requires both like improved UX, but also like improved education on the accounts of like us, the people in the Web3 community who sort of like have some level of understanding of how these products are working. I'm curious for how you guys at Mirror are thinking about, I believe Tina from Pace Capital calls it like embedded education. So how are you guys embedding the educational process into your product to sort of make that transition? And like, if you want to use the example that you just described, like a potential use case, that would be cool too.
Yeah, definitely. The onboarding education is something that it's tough, and the real answer is that up until now, we'll work really manually with people. And I see Linda in the audience here, and recently we worked together with a project that was trying to raise money through a crowdfund for an Ethereum documentary. And a lot of that was just coordinating together, have a Google Doc, share best practices that we've learned, hop on calls, talk about tactically how we should design the experiment, and then also even just like formatting the entry. And of course, I learned a bunch, and I think you need to do that early on just to understand, okay, what are the common issues that people face, questions they have, what's difficult to use or understand. But I think this next phase, as we recently did an airdrop, and we're trying to figure out other ways to grow the community faster. And I think that in the future, I think that the old version of this would be, okay, maybe you do like Superhuman as a good example is for onboarding, and look to them a lot. And what they did was they started off with the CEO would onboard Superhuman users manually. And for those that don't know, Superhuman is like an email client, and you're able to use it through shortcuts to get through your email faster. And so, the CEO would onboard people manually, and then the head of growth would, and they hired like a head of customer support, and then they hired onboarding specialists. And so I think that the Web 2 version of that is, okay, Superhuman Incorporated hires people and decides how this onboarding should go. But I think it'd be really cool that we're seeing these service DAOs that basically focus on a specific problem or function or skill, and then go to different protocols and community projects and work for them in exchange for tokens or some other form of payment, maybe ETH. And so one example is Llama for treasury management. And so I could see there being like a protocol specialist service DAO. And you basically have this DAO, there's people that become specialists in a few protocols, and other VC funds are hiring protocol specialists. And I can see people doing that for like more customer support type things. And then, yeah, you basically get paid in a mirror token whenever that comes, or like an ETH or USDC or some combination. And yeah, you basically have this DAO that's responsible for training the team internally. They work with the protocol, but yeah, these are just like sovereign, independent individuals. They can work the hours they want. And yeah, I think it's going to be like this really interesting, like cross protocol type thing, as opposed to us like scaling up a 50-person like customer support team.
Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense. Joey, Jared, anything you want to add on that point around embedded education interoperability?
I mean, I'd say like there's an interesting, I feel like there's a lot of kind of companies out there that are really trying to think about what that onboarding looks like, both from a specific platform point of view, but also from an industry point of view. And where I think there's a big like gap, but also opportunity, I'd say is, I feel like there's a lot of like higher education value for crypto. Like you already kind of have a wallet, you understand, right, how to like auth, log in, leverage it, purchase. You kind of understand fundamentals, and you're really looking to go deeper, like whether that's in DeFi or, you know, publishing content, kind of any of the opportunities that these platforms really open up. And I do feel like there's still this kind of like elementary school or even like preschool education opportunity for crypto and Web3 that probably needs to look at how the existing platforms operate, like these Web2 large social networks, and what are kind of the best ways to incentivize and engage to get people to do things there. So it's kind of like answering the question a different way, but I do see there like a massive opportunity there for people to kind of better understand like how to onboard a wallet, and, you know, like really understand what airdrop means, and, you know, really like sort of get the notion of what these incentive mechanisms could do. And there's like a lot of these things bubbling up, and I think it's a really exciting time for that. Because I do think too, right, there is, I mean, at least from the Mirror point of view, and again, like I don't work there, so this is just someone who writes for them. I think Mirror has a lot to focus on as well, right? There is like the onboarding component and getting people to understand how to use it. But then there are people like Linda and, you know, myself and others who are, you know, building projects on top of it, thinking about how to structure DAOs, thinking about what the future media company could look like. And that's also something that, you know, Patrick and the team have to think about. So I feel like there's like a couple different roads to get to this kind of onboarding opportunity through platforms and then crypto more at large. And, you know, it's an interesting debate to have as to like when and where that pressure falls on, you know, the platforms themselves, and really trying to influence the roadmap, because there are customers at various degrees of, you know, comprehension versus, you know, new challenger type products that could come and fill the gap for those sort of things, which is, you know, inviting people in, better educating, getting people to more deeply understand so that they're ready to enter these platforms and take advantage of them, you know, in like a way more structured and comfortable way.
Yeah, the only small thing I would add to both of those points, I think also in terms of embedded education, I really think for me, it's like there's a huge need on the builder side too. So I think partially it's, you know, how do you educate creators and consumers to kind of use these tools? But exactly because there is this kind of like tide that lifts all boats. So, you know, in this new kind of Web3 world, the more really high quality interoperable products we can build, the better the overall experience could get. But I think for that, it's really, you know, there's a lot of education needed in terms of just how do you actually build into this in a way that makes sense? How do you get more really talented people in the space? So, what are the open projects that are just like no-brainers that someone should be working on? And I think there's much more of an incentive here, to actually do or help get that work done, just because it is kind of, interoperable. So I'm really excited to see people work on that, to help work on it, just kind of get more creative builders, into the right, spots, like Jared said, where there is a gap and someone should just fill it in.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, when Jared was talking, there's something that came to mind around, I know that, he recently is PCG invested in Zedrun, and also there's Axie Infinity, and like looking at these different protocols, like Mirror, like we try to view ourselves as an economy, and I know there's gaming products look at themselves as an economy, and it's like another source of like onboarding and education is going to be like in normal economies, you have apprenticeships, you have schools, etc. I think the interesting thing is that now in crypto, you have this like liquid form of rewarding people. And so the place we see at Mirror that kind of the playbook is first like release a feature with like someone like an influential or big project that gets a lot of people excited about it. They see how it works. And like the best education, at least at first, is just running an experiment and a successful experiment. And people can see like after the documentary crowdfund, there was like 10 people that had film projects that reached out to us and wanted to do one. We've had a few already in the past few weeks. And so that's like step one, is like launch with someone and use that as documentation. And step two, we can see like as you grow this economy, then the customers and the people like building the product, the people that run these experiments are teaching each other. I think that's really interesting. And the underlying protocol can reward people based off of how much they're contributing to the economy, and people can vote on each other and do like peer review system where it's, this person helped me, and so they get rewarded. So I think that, I just was thinking about just like at a deeper level, some other examples, and there's like Zedrun, Axie, Yield Guild with their scholarship program and training people. And so I think there's just like so much interesting stuff that's still in the early stages, but really excited about.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how the technical interoperability, which is sort of been the topic of this conversation, is overlaid by the people organizing, the people composability, and how like various organizations getting involved, like various other organizations, whether they be DAOs, individuals, or otherwise, sort of like spurs the interoperability at the product level and vice versa. I think it's a pretty interesting relationship to think about, and I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and like what I'd say too is like we're talking about really kind of onboarding and showcasing like Web3 unlocks. Like you think about what Patrick just said, and you really think about the structure of a DAO where this community is, incentivized both to like create and leverage the platform, but also to like root for and encourage others, around them to be successful on that platform as well. And you look at an example of like a Web2 platform of like a Facebook where, all of that burden went on to, Facebook product design and engineers to really figure out like how you onboard people to create a profile and, do a group. And, there has to be like an FAQ and a wiki and all of these things that the platform itself needs to deeply invest in order to build kind of like a smooth onboarding experience for all these individual users. And when you think about a DAO construct, you now have all of these participants who both feel that ownership, but also like the influence in order to lean in and make others successful. So you really kind of have a group of peers that are also there for you, right? Whether it's in like Discord channels or, stuff that they're writing, or just being able to kind of connect with them one-on-one, that also really are encouraged to kind of help others be successful on that platform too, which I think is just something completely new and revolutionary when you think about like how any of these closed networks have been set up. You've never thought of like going to like another Washington Post reader or going to another like Twitter user and being like, how do I do this? Right? You'd like Google it or go to the wiki. Now all of a sudden you have this entire community incentivized to help others deeply understand it. And I think that's like a massive, massive thing that is probably under discussed, but is really going to change both the way like we see Web3 platforms on board, but also I think you'll see a lot of like Web2 platforms and companies outside of crypto start to take that as influence and, try to build that within their products.
100%. I think we're definitely aligned there. Nir, you want to just like quick intro and ask your question?
Yeah, just wanted to chime in a bit. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Nir, co-founder of Yup. Point that was made earlier about the difference between sort of decentralization and composability. I think that we've seen a lot of awesome projects in the space that are permissionless and composable, but aren't necessarily as decentralized as we'd like them to be in the future. And I think for me, that's sort of what I see Web 2.5 being. And I compare something like Mirror to something like Flow or NBA Top Shot, each of which have their points of centralization, but one of which is extremely composable and permissionless in terms of how it's expected to be used and the encouragement for things to be built on top of it and so on and so forth. That I think Flow is now waking up to and understanding in terms of maybe what they got wrong the first time around, despite building an amazing product around NBA Top Shot. So I just think that's a really interesting outcome that I think has come out over the last couple of months, and it's sort of important to note as things are decentralizing over time. Really building these standards and having things that are permissionless and composable has been extremely important. Curious what you guys think. I mean, there seems to be a little talk, and I've seen like Brian Flynn tweet about this a lot. This idea that like communities can essentially, and Patrick mentioned a little bit with the service DAO stuff, but basically this idea that communities can go after big products, big industries, big markets, sometimes from scratch, and sometimes maybe forking existing protocols and products. And actually the community being sort of the value add there, right? If you imagine, something like a lending platform or a market maker, like an AMM DEX, but being created by a community, right? Would that hold more water? Is that where things are going? Are we seeing a trend of that now with the service DAOs, and will we see more and more of that in the future?
I think that, it is really interesting where I think that with these, I 100% agree that with a lot of these DAOs, especially on the more, like what I'm really interested in these days are these community DAOs where they basically just start off as a Telegram chat or a Discord server, and they're just friends hanging out, doing things on their own. And then eventually maybe they'll say, okay, let's have this token as a way to make decisions or as a way to have on-chain revenue and capture some of it and share it with people, and then they get more sophisticated, maybe they have a multi-sig, et cetera, and then they turn into these projects that are raising like millions of dollars from VCs and stuff like the FWBs, it's stuff like Pleaser DAO and others as well. And I think that with these DAOs are turning into like modern startups or crypto-native startups and going from a group chat to these startups. I think that, at the end of the day, even if they don't even, for a lot of these, they don't necessarily even have code that you can fork necessarily. Like they have the token and then you could airdrop it to other people. But again, that's like really spamming. I think that at least on the community side, consumer side, starting even as just like an MVP, if you want to start it out or join it out, just being part of that initial community, having that engagement, like this real, the Forefront, for example, as well. And it's like, I just think that these are going more from like communities and then evolving potentially into these projects. And it's going to be if you start from that angle, as opposed to, okay, let's build this product and then try and get people interested in it and then add a token. And then I think that, is definitely much more shaky ground to build on.
I agree. I'll try to take it in a different direction. Like I feel that we, at least in this space right now, and the opportunity ahead and how early it is, it would be unfortunate to limit structures in a certain way. So I'd say how I like to think about a lot of these things is like really like trying to identify why things are happening a certain way right now, and how those certain functions could be applicable across other measures. Like that's where I actually find it most interesting to look at existing structures or companies or platforms in a built community and really try to like retrofit the notion of what these things would look like within those systems and try to see, what gets dropped or what gets escalated and kind of working through that too. So, I mean, I would just say like, I think it's a very agile world, and especially as it relates to, community participation and, the notions that we're talking about of like how much function should be on platform or off platform. I think just the environment needs to be very agile and comfortable being agile to, be able to test and see what works. And, it won't be like a blank canvas. Like I think we'll see very similarly to what we saw in Web2, like, classifications of different sorts of companies and the purpose that they drive and, the different way that they'll use certain tools and position themselves. Like, I don't think it's just going to be like a foundation that is used across many things. I think we'll start to see each of these companies and categories build their own identity and figure out what works for them.
Definitely. Looks like we don't have any more hands up, and there weren't questions in the voice text. So I think we can wrap this up a bit early. Joey, anything that you want to sort of close things with?
No, I mean, I don't think so. Yeah, definitely welcome, anyone who wants to check out this post and give me some feedback. Let me know what I missed. Hopefully we'll be writing some follow-ups, with Patrick and Jared as well. So, and thanks to everyone for being here and Jared for hosting.
Yeah, thank you guys.
For sure. No, appreciate you. Thank you. Appreciate you all for joining. This is a really, really great combo. Hopefully we can do this again soon. I know, Patrick, this is not your first time on a Hangout, and Jared, hope it's not your last time either. But really, really appreciate you guys showing up, and to those in the audience, appreciate you guys showing up as well and asking questions. And yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday for another Hangouts. The link to Joey's post is in the voice text for anybody who hasn't already checked it out. And until then, we shall talk soon. But yeah, have a good one, y'all.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.